My name is Eleanor Thompson, and at 67 years old, I never imagined my own children would call me just a widow. 2 years after losing Robert, my husband of 43 years, I sat stunned at my dining room table as my daughter Margaret and son William shouted those words at me. "Shut up, widow." The phrase echoed through the room I'd spent decades filling with love and sacrifice. That dinner changed everything. The business I'd built from scratch, which had put them through college and funded their lavish lifestyles, suddenly became the center of a family war. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe if you want more real stories about standing up for yours. I grew up in a small town in Massachusetts, the daughter of a schoolteacher and a mechanic. My parents taught me the value of hard work and education, always encouraging me to dream bigger than our modest surroundings. I was determined to make something of myself, and in 1974, I became the first person in my family to attend college. That's where I met Robert Thompson. He was studying business administration, while I pursued a degree in culinary arts. We met in a campus cafeteria where I worked part-time. Robert came in every Tuesday and Thursday, always ordering the daily special and leaving a generous tip. One day, he finally worked up the courage to ask me on a date. "I've been eating mediocre cafeteria food for 3 months just to see you," he confessed on our first date. "I think that qualifies as dedication." We married shortly after graduation, settling in a small apartment while Robert began his career at an accounting firm. I dreamed of opening my own restaurant, but when I became pregnant with Margaret in 1979, those plans had to wait. William followed just 2 years later in 1981. The early years were tough. Robert worked long hours, but his junior position didn't pay much. After William was born, I started a small catering business from our home kitchen to supplement our income. I'd prepare meals while the children napped, then deliver them in our old station wagon with both kids buckled in the back seat. What began as a necessity quickly became a passion. Word spread about my food, and within 3 years, I was catering local business events and small weddings. Robert, despite being raised in a traditional household where men were breadwinners and women stayed home, became my biggest supporter. "You've got a gift, Ellie," he'd say. "Don't hide it in our kitchen." With Robert's encouragement and help with the children, I opened my first small restaurant in 1988. Eleanor's Kitchen focused on home-style comfort food made with local ingredients, revolutionary at the time. We mortgaged our house to secure the loan, risking everything on my dream. The risk paid off. Within 5 years, we opened a second location, then a third. By the time Margaret and William were teenagers, Eleanor's Kitchen had become a regional chain with 12 locations across 3 states. Robert eventually left his accounting job to handle the financial side of our growing business. The success allowed us to provide our children with everything we never had: private schools, summer camps, college without student loans, and down payments on their first homes. We wanted them to have advantages, but we also tried to instill our work ethic. Both children worked summer jobs at our restaurants during high school, Margaret as a hostess and William in the kitchen. They complained constantly, but Robert and I believed it was important for them to understand the business that provided their comfortable lives. As they grew older, their involvement became more symbolic than substantial. Margaret got a marketing degree and technically oversaw our advertising, though she delegated most work to our marketing team. William, after several changed majors, got a business degree and held the title of operations manager, though our longtime employees handled the day-to-day operations. Robert and I had planned to gradually hand over the business to them, then retire to travel the world and enjoy our golden years together. We'd worked so hard for so long, sacrificing time and energy to build something lasting for our family. But fate had other plans. 2 years ago, at 68, Robert suffered a massive heart attack while playing golf. By the time the ambulance arrived, he was gone. My partner, my champion, my best friend, taken in an instant. The grief was overwhelming. For months I could barely function. Margaret and William stepped in to handle funeral arrangements and temporarily manage the business, for which I was grateful. But as the fog of early grief began to lift, I noticed troubling changes. Robert's will had been clear. The business and our considerable investments would pass to me, with the understanding that Margaret and William would eventually inherit everything. We'd established a family trust years ago with the guidance of our attorney, Jessica Reynolds, who had become a close friend over decades of managing our legal affairs. The structure was intentional. Robert and I wanted our children to benefit from our hard work, but we also wanted to ensure the business remained stable and profitable. We worried about their readiness to manage such a large enterprise without supervision. My concerns grew as I observed their behavior in the months after Robert's passing. What had begun as helpful involvement during my grieving period quickly transformed into something more concerning. Margaret, my eldest, had always had expensive taste. Even as a teenager, she wanted the designer labels her friends wore. Robert and I had tried to teach her the value of money, but our growing wealth made those lessons difficult to enforce. By 45, she was living in a mini-mansion in the most exclusive neighborhood in the city. Her 5-bedroom house sat mostly empty since her divorce 3 years earlier. Her children, my grandchildren Sophia and Thomas, split their time between her home and their father's equally lavish residence across town. Margaret drove a new luxury SUV that cost more than our first house, replaced her designer wardrobe seasonally, and took extravagant vacations to exclusive resorts. All of this might have been fine if she'd earned it through her work with our company, but Margaret's position as marketing director had become largely ceremonial. She attended quarterly meetings, approved budgets created by others, and collected a salary that far exceeded her contributions. When I gently suggested she take a more active role, she reminded me that she was too busy with her charity board positions secured through our family name and donations. William's situation concerned me even more. After college, he'd launched several business ventures, a sports bar, an indoor golf facility, a specialty food import company, all funded by loans from Robert and me. None lasted more than 2 years. Each failure was blamed on market conditions, unreliable partners, or bad timing, never on William's lack of preparation or commitment. Between failed ventures, he would return to a nominal position with our company, drawing a substantial salary while contributing minimal effort. His latest title, Operations Director, came with a corner office he rarely occupied and responsibilities he routinely delegated to others. William lived in a downtown penthouse, collected expensive watches, and maintained memberships at exclusive clubs. His financial irresponsibility extended to his personal life at 43. He'd never stayed in a relationship longer than 3 years, yet each breakup seemed to require expensive gifts and exotic vacations to heal his broken heart. Both children had developed a troubling habit of using company resources for personal expenses. Margaret charged personal shopping to the company credit card, justifying it as wardrobe necessary for representing the business. William used company vehicles, took business trips that seemed more like vacations, and had company staff handling his personal errands. As I regained my footing after Robert's death, I attempted to address these issues. I scheduled individual lunches with each of them, trying to guide them toward better business practices without being confrontational. The company isn't a personal ATM, I explained to Margaret over lunch at her favorite restaurant. Your father and I built this business to last generations, not to fund shopping sprees. She smiled indulgently, patting my hand as though I were a confused child. Mom, you don't understand modern business. These expenses are networking investments. Besides, Daddy never questioned my expenses. But he had. Robert had been deeply concerned about both children's financial habits. We'd had many private conversations about how to address the issue without creating family conflict. His sudden death had left that unresolved problem entirely in my hands. William was even more dismissive. Mom, you should be enjoying your retirement, not worrying about business details. That's why you have us. Take a cruise or something. Their attitude stung deeply. They seemed to have forgotten, or perhaps never fully appreciated, that I was the founder of Eleanor's Kitchen. Robert had joined the business after I'd already established our first successful location. The recipes, the concept, the original vision, those were mine. Yes, Robert's financial acumen had helped us expand, but the heart and soul of the business had always been my creation. My attempts to be involved in their lives outside of business met similar resistance. Invitations to family dinners were met with excuses about busy schedules. Offers to watch my grandchildren were accepted only when their usual nannies were unavailable. Holiday gatherings became shorter, more perfunctory, with both Margaret and William often checking their phones or leaving early for other engagements. Most concerning was how my grandchildren were being influenced. Sophia at 16 already expected designer clothes and expensive electronics. Thomas at 14 played video games on equipment that cost thousands of dollars. Neither showed much interest in academics or developing any particular skills. When I suggested summer jobs to teach them responsibility, both Margaret and William scoffed. "They have plenty of time to work when they're adults," Margaret said. "Their job now is to enjoy being kids. With the family business," William added, "they'll never need to worry about money anyway." The final straw came during a weekend visit when I overheard Thomas talking to a friend on his gaming headset. "Yeah, Grandma's loaded," he said casually. "When she kicks it, Mom says we'll all be set for life." I felt physically ill hearing my own grandson reducing me to a future inheritance. Had that message come from my children? Was that all I represented to them now? A wallet and awaiting death? Family gatherings grew increasingly tense. Thanksgiving dinner the previous year had ended with William storming out after I questioned a business expense for a trip to Aspen with no apparent business purpose. Christmas morning had been marred by Margaret's cold reaction to my handmade gifts. She'd set aside the personalized photo album I'd spent weeks creating in favor of checking whether the gift card I'd included met her expectations. As the months passed, I realized with growing clarity that my children saw me as a financial resource, not as a person with feelings, expertise, or wisdom to share. They waited impatiently for me to retreat into quiet widowhood, leaving them to drain the business and inheritance Robert and I had spent decades building. The more I tried to maintain standards and accountability, the more they pushed back. Their attitudes made it clear. They were waiting for me to die so they could take complete control. The revelation broke my heart but also awakened something in me. A determination to address the situation before it was too late. Not just for the business, but for my children's characters and futures. Sometimes true love means making difficult choices. Last month, I decided it was time for a serious family discussion. I invited Margaret and William to dinner at my home. The colonial-style house Robert and I had purchased 20 years ago when the business really took off. It sits on 3 acres with a view of the lake, spacious but not ostentatious. Every corner holds memories of the life Robert and I built together. I spent the entire day preparing Robert's favorite meal, pot roast with roasted vegetables, homemade rolls, and apple pie for dessert. Cooking has always been my therapy, and as I chopped, seasoned, and baked, I rehearsed what I wanted to say to my children. I set the dining room table with our best china and Robert's favorite Cabernet. They were both 45 minutes late. Margaret arrived first, immediately complaining about traffic while checking her phone. William showed up 15 minutes after her, offering no excuse for his tardiness. Neither commented on the effort I'd put into the meal or asked how I was doing. "I hope this won't take long, Mom," Margaret said as we sat down. "I have a charity gala this evening." "I've got plans too," William added, loosening his tie and reaching for the wine. I took a deep breath. This is important. It's about the future of our family and the business. For the first 20 minutes, I tried to keep the conversation light, asking about their lives and my grandchildren. Their responses were perfunctory, impatient. When I served the main course, I decided it was time to address my concerns. "I've been reviewing the company finances," I began carefully. "There are some issues we need to discuss." Both immediately stiffened. "Such as?" William asked, his tone already defensive. "For starters, the personal expenses being charged to the business have gotten out of hand. The IRS could classify many of these as taxable benefits. And the new expansion plans don't make financial sense given current market conditions." Margaret set down her fork with a clatter. "Mom, the board already approved those plans." "A board that consists of you, William, and 2 junior executives who don't dare contradict either of you," I pointed out. "That's not proper oversight." "We're growing the business," William insisted. "Dad would have understood strategic investment." "Your father was fiscally conservative," I corrected him. "He would never have approved expanding, while our existing locations' profits are declining." Margaret rolled her eyes. "Those profit reports are just quarterly fluctuations." "They're a trend," I insisted. One that coincides with both of you taking larger salaries while working fewer hours. The tension escalated quickly. William's face flushed red as I outlined specific examples of wasteful spending and questionable business decisions. Margaret's expression grew increasingly cold as I suggested reducing expenses and refocusing on core business principles. Furthermore, I continued, I'm concerned about the example being set for Sophia and Thomas. They're growing up believing money appears magically without effort. Don't you dare criticize my parenting, Margaret snapped. You had your chance to raise children. Times are different now. The values of hard work and responsibility never go out of style, I replied. Robert and I built this business from nothing. We worked 16-hour days for years. And now you get to enjoy the benefits, William interrupted. So do we. That was the point, wasn't it? The point was building something meaningful that would last generations, I explained, not watching it be drained in one. William slammed his hand on the table, making the dishes jump. You're being dramatic. The business is fine. It won't be if things continue this way, I insisted. I'm still the majority shareholder, and I have concerns about the direction. Just shut up, widow, William shouted, standing up so abruptly his chair fell backward. Dad would have let us run things our way. You've never understood the business side anyway. The room went deadly silent. I felt as though I'd been physically struck. Margaret could have diffused the situation. Instead, she joined in. He's right, Mom. You're just a lonely old widow who doesn't understand modern business. Dad protected you from the hard decisions. Now you're bored and interfering where you don't belong. The cruelty of their words stole my breath. These were my children, the babies I'd nursed, the toddlers whose tears I'd wiped, the teenagers I'd guided through heartbreaks and disappointments. And now they saw me as nothing but an inconvenient widow. I looked at their angry faces across the table and felt an unexpected clarity wash over me. This wasn't a temporary disagreement or a misunderstanding. This was who they had become. And I had helped create these entitled, disrespectful adults by giving too much while expecting too little. I think you should both leave, I said quietly. Gladly, William snapped, grabbing his jacket. Call us when you're ready to be reasonable. Don't expect me at Sunday dinner next week, Margaret added, collecting her designer purse. I think we all need some space. They stormed out, leaving me alone with a table full of uneaten food and the shattered illusion of what I thought my family was. I sat in the silent dining room for hours, moving from shock to grief to something unexpected resolve. Robert and I had always been partners in parenting, balancing each other when needed. Without him, I had tried to avoid conflict, allowing behaviors we would never have tolerated together. That ended tonight. I cleared the table methodically, wrapped the untouched food, and washed each dish by hand. As I worked, a plan began forming in my mind. By morning, I knew exactly what needed to be done. I barely slept that night. By 7 a.m., I was on the phone with Jessica Reynolds, our family attorney for over 30 years. Jessica had not only handled our business contracts and wills, but had become a trusted friend who understood our family dynamics. Eleanor, I'm so sorry, she said after I recounted the previous night's events. What do you need from me? I need to understand my options, I replied. Legally, what control do I have over the business and family trust? We arranged to meet at her office that afternoon. I spent the morning reviewing financial documents and business records, gathering evidence of the concerns I'd tried to discuss with my children. Jessica's downtown office offered a view of the city skyline Robert and I had watched change over decades. Now in her early 60s, Jessica had a reputation for both sharp legal mind and compassionate counsel. The good news, she explained as we reviewed documents, is that you and Robert structured things very clearly. As surviving spouse, you have full control of the family business and trust. She outlined my legal position. I own 75% of Eleanor's kitchen outright, with each child holding 12.5% in restricted shares. The family trust, which contained our investments and property, named me as primary trustee with full discretionary powers. Robert was insistent about maintaining clear lines of authority, Jessica reminded me. He worried about exactly this scenario. We both did, I admitted. But we always hoped giving them responsibility would help them mature. And if that hasn't happened? Jessica asked gently. Then I need to do what Robert and I should have done years ago. After our meeting, I drove to my sister Patricia's house. 10 years younger than me, Patricia had always been my confidant. Unlike me, she'd chosen a career in education over business, and her perspective often balanced my own. Patricia listened without interruption as I described the dinner and my tentative plan. When I finished, she took my hands in hers. Ellie, you've always put your children first, sometimes to your own detriment. Ask yourself, are you helping or hurting them by continuing to enable this behavior? I feel like I'm betraying them, I confessed. No, Patricia said firmly. You're betraying the values you and Robert wanted to instill in them. Sometimes love means doing the difficult thing. Over the next 3 days, I researched family business dynamics and consulted with a psychologist who specialized in inheritance issues. Dr. Marshall confirmed what I suspected, that financial enablement often stunts emotional and professional development. Your children have never faced real consequences, he explained. Without them, there's no incentive to change. I spent hours in Robert's study, surrounded by his books and photos, mentally consulting him about my decision. In our marriage, we'd always made major decisions together. Now I had to trust that I knew what he would have wanted. By the end of the week, I had developed a comprehensive plan. I met again with Jessica to implement the legal aspects, then with our company's longtime CFO to arrange business transitions. I wrote and rewrote my letter to Margaret and William, trying to balance firmness with love. On Sunday evening, exactly 1 week after the disastrous dinner, I packed a single suitcase with essentials. I took one last walk through the house, touching familiar objects and gathering a few precious photos. I placed my letter on the kitchen counter where it would be immediately visible. In the garage, I bypassed my usual luxury sedan, a gift from Robert on our 40th anniversary, and instead took the keys to my old Volvo, the practical car I kept as a backup. The sedan would remain in the garage as a reminder of my absence. As I backed out of the driveway, I felt both terrible sadness and surprising freedom. For the first time since Robert's death, I was making a decision entirely for myself and the long-term good of my family, even if they couldn't see it that way yet. I took one last look at the house illuminated in the evening light. I'm doing the right thing, I whispered, hoping Robert could somehow hear me. Then I drove away, headed for a future none of us had anticipated. My letter began simply, Margaret and William, by the time you read this I will be gone. Not permanently, but for long enough that we all might gain some perspective. Last Sunday's dinner made it clear that our family has lost its way, and I bear much of the responsibility for allowing that to happen. Your father and I built Eleanor's kitchen from nothing. We worked endless hours, sacrificed vacations and luxuries, and reinvested profits year after year to create something lasting. We did this not just for ourselves, but to provide security for our family, and to leave a legacy we could be proud of. Somewhere along the way, that legacy became distorted. What was meant to be a foundation for growth became an entitlement. What should have inspired work ethic instead fostered dependency. After much reflection and consultation with our family advisors, I have made several decisions. 1. Effective immediately, both of you are removed from the company payroll and board of directors. Your shares remain in trust but voting rights revert to me as majority shareholder. 2. Professional management has been appointed to oversee daily operations. Jessica Reynolds has their names and contact information. 3. Your access to the family trust has been modified. You will each receive a monthly allowance sufficient for reasonable living expenses, but no more. This includes mortgage/rent, utilities, food, and basic transportation. The allowance does not cover luxury items, vacations, or non-essential purchases. 4. Your trust fund credit cards have been canceled. Any attempt to sell assets currently in your possession that were purchased with family funds will trigger further restrictions. 5. Your children's educational trusts remain untouched and will continue to be available for legitimate educational expenses. These changes are not permanent, but their duration depends entirely on you. To regain your positions and privileges, you must demonstrate 6 months of productive employment outside the family business. Completion of financial management courses. Regular community service. Participation in family counseling. I have not made these decisions lightly or in anger. I make them from love for the values your father and I believed in, love for the business we built together, and most importantly, love for the people I know you can still become. When you're ready to discuss this constructively, Jessica knows how to reach me. With enduring love despite everything. Mom. I imagine them finding the letter the next morning. Margaret always came by on Mondays to use my home gym, arriving around 9 a.m. when she thought I'd be out running errands. William typically stopped by later in the day, ostensibly to check on me but really to raid my wine cellar for the expensive bottles Robert had collected. Jessica called me at my temporary apartment around 10:30 a.m. Margaret just left my office, she reported. I've never seen her so upset. How did she take it? I asked, my stomach tightening. About as expected. First disbelief, then anger, then threats. I explained that everything was legal and binding. She demanded to know where you are. And you didn't tell her? Of course not. I respected your wishes. William is here now, demanding the same information. Eleanor, are you sure about this? I've never been more certain of anything in my life, I told her. Stay the course, Jessica. Throughout the day, my phone filled with increasingly frantic text messages and voicemails from both children. Mom, this isn't funny. Call me back immediately.
Margaret, 10:45 morgens.
What the hell is going on? You can't do this.
William, 11:30 morgens.
I'm calling the police if you don't respond. This is ridiculous. Margaret, 1:15 p.m. You've completely lost it. Dad would be ashamed. William, 2:40 p.m. I didn't respond to any of them, though each message was like a knife to my heart. Instead, I focused on unpacking in my sparsely furnished apartment, located in a quiet building across town where no one would think to look for me. According to Jessica's updates, Margaret and William went to the corporate headquarters that afternoon, only to find themselves denied entry by security. The new interim CEO, Michael Bronson, a respected industry veteran I'd quietly recruited the previous week, had already addressed the senior staff about the transition. By evening, reality was beginning to sink in. The messages changed tone. Mom, please, we need to talk about this. Whatever's upset you, we can fix it. Margaret, 6:20 p.m. This is going to destroy the business. Is that what you want? William, 7:05 p.m. Jessica reported that both had attempted to access their trust funds for large withdrawals, only to discover the new restrictions in place. Margaret had tried to use her corporate credit card at her favorite boutique, facing the humiliation of having it declined. William had called a family friend who sat on the board of directors, only to learn the board had been restructured under my authority as majority shareholder. The friend, who had long disapproved of William's business practices, had fully supported the change. By the next morning, their united front had crumbled. Jessica forwarded an email exchange between them, accidentally copied to her, blaming each other for pushing me too far. This is your fault, Margaret had written. If you hadn't called her a widow, she wouldn't have snapped. You agreed with me. William fired back. And you're the one who's been maxing out company cards on shopping sprees. At least my expenses were business-related. Their panic intensified when they discovered I'd withdrawn just $10,000 in cash, enough to live on modestly for a few months, leaving the bulk of our liquid assets untouched. This wasn't about money for me, it was about principles. Within 3 days, both had consulted separate attorneys, only to receive the same advice. The arrangements were legally sound, and fighting them would likely result in even stricter limitations. The best path forward was to comply with my requirements. A week passed. I settled into a quiet routine in my anonymous apartment, spending my days reading, walking in a nearby park, and reflecting on the past decades of my life. For the first time since Robert's death, I had space to properly grieve him without managing family drama. The distance, painful as it was, felt necessary for my own healing as well as for my children's growth. Jessica kept me updated on essential developments, but respected my request to filter out emotional manipulation. I knew my children were struggling with the sudden lifestyle adjustment. Margaret had been forced to cancel a planned vacation to Europe. William had received notice that his country club membership fees were past due. The most difficult moment came when Jessica informed me that Thomas, my 14-year-old grandson, had posted an angry rant on social media about his crazy grandmother, who had abandoned the family. The post included hurtful speculations about my mental health. I cried for hours that night, questioning my decision. But the next morning, I received an unexpected message from my 16-year-old granddaughter Sophia. "Grandma, I don't know what's happening with Mom and Uncle Will, but I miss you. Are you okay?" Her simple concern, free from accusations or demands, reassured me that I hadn't lost everyone. I responded briefly through Jessica, letting Sophia know I was safe and that I loved her. By the end of the second week, the initial crisis had evolved into a new reality. According to Jessica, both Margaret and William had begun reluctantly exploring employment opportunities. The business continued operating smoothly under professional management. And I had begun to envision a life beyond being just a mother, widow, and business owner. A life with possibilities I hadn't considered in years. I settled in a small coastal town about 2 hours from the city, renting a modest cottage with a view of the ocean. I'd always loved the sea but rarely had time to enjoy it during the busy years of raising children and running the business. Now I walk the beach every morning, collecting shells and watching shorebirds dance along the water's edge. For the first time in decades, I was living simply. My cottage had just enough space for comfort, a cozy living room with bookshelves I gradually filled, a kitchen where I could still indulge my love of cooking, and a small garden I tended daily. I introduced myself to neighbors simply as Ellie, a widow taking some time for herself. No one knew about Eleanor's kitchen or my family situation. I made new friends gradually: Martha, a retired librarian who shared my love of mystery novels, George, a widower who taught me to fish off the local pier, and Denise, who owned the small bakery where I soon began volunteering a few mornings each week. These relationships were refreshingly simple, based on who I was rather than what I owned. "You've got magic in your hands," Denise told me after customers began specifically requesting the muffins and pastries I baked. "Ever thought of opening your own place?" I laughed at the irony but found joy in baking just for pleasure again, without the pressures of profit margins and expansion plans. Meanwhile, back in the city, my children were facing their own transformations. Jessica kept me informed of major developments. Margaret, unable to maintain her previous lifestyle on the allowance, had been forced to downsize. She sold her luxury SUV, replacing it with a practical sedan, and had listed some of her designer items on consignment websites. The for sale sign went up in front of her oversized house within a month. "She's found an apartment in a nice but not extravagant neighborhood," Jessica reported during our weekly call. "Still spacious enough for the children's visits, but within the budget." More surprisingly, Margaret had accepted a position with a local marketing firm. A real job with accountability to people who weren't family. According to Jessica, the initial adjustment had been rough. "Her boss called me as your family attorney," Jessica shared with barely concealed amusement. Apparently Margaret tried to delegate all her assignments to junior staff, and was shocked when that wasn't acceptable. But she's learning. William's journey proved more tumultuous. He'd initially tried to contest the trust changes, hiring an aggressive attorney who specialized in family disputes. The effort backfired when the attorney, after reviewing the documentation, advised William that his case had no merit and refused to pursue it. After several rejected job applications, his resume of failed businesses and nominal roles didn't impress potential employers. William finally secured a sales position at a commercial real estate firm. His natural charm and network of contacts proved valuable, though his initial resistance to regular office hours and reporting structures caused friction. "He's been through 3 performance warnings," Jessica told me in our 3rd month of separation. "But his manager says he's showing improvement. He's actually making some sales." William had been forced to give up his penthouse, moving to a 1-bedroom apartment in a middle-class neighborhood. His collection of luxury watches had been sold to cover outstanding debts. Most touchingly, Jessica forwarded me an email from Sophia, my teenage granddaughter, sent about 4 months after I left. "Dear Grandma, Mom doesn't know I'm writing to you. Things are really different now. We moved to an apartment last month. Mom says it's temporary until she figures things out. She's working at a marketing company and comes home tired every day. She makes dinner herself now instead of ordering in all the time. I overheard her talking to Uncle Will about you. She said she never realized how hard you must have worked all those years. I don't really understand everything that happened, but I miss you. Mom seems sad but also different somehow. More like the mom I remember from when I was little. Is it okay if I write to you sometimes? Love, Sophia. With Jessica's help, I established a private email account just for corresponding with Sophia. Our exchanges became a bright spot in my days. I never spoke negatively about her mother or uncle, instead sharing stories about my daily life and asking about her school and interests. Through Sophia, I learned that Thomas was struggling more with the changes but had joined the school soccer team. His first extracurricular activity that didn't involve expensive technology. As the holiday season approached, I felt the separation more acutely. Thanksgiving had always been a major celebration in our family, with me cooking for days and the house filled with extended family and friends. This year, I accepted an invitation to join Martha and her family, bringing my signature pumpkin pies and feeling grateful for new connections while missing my own children. The mixture of peace and sadness became my constant companion. I'd found a balance I hadn't experienced since Robert's death, space to breathe, think, and rediscover parts of myself that had been subsumed by family obligations and business demands. Yet the mother in me ached for reconciliation. In the 5th month of our separation, I received the first direct communication that wasn't angry or manipulative. It was a handwritten letter from Margaret. Dear Mom, I've written and torn up this letter a dozen times. Pride has never been my best quality, a trait I'm now realizing I get from you. But I need to say this. I miss you. Not your money or the business or the lifestyle. Though I won't pretend the changes haven't been hard. I miss you. Sunday dinners. Your voice. Even your annoying habit of rearranging my kitchen when you visit. Working a regular job has been humbling. My boss doesn't care who my parents are or what my last name is. Results are all that matter. It's terrifying and also strangely satisfying when I actually accomplish something on my own merit. Sophia and Thomas miss you desperately. This has been hardest on them, and I realize now that's on me. I've been so focused on material things that I neglected to teach them what really matters. I'm not asking for anything except maybe a conversation when you're ready. There's a lot I need to understand better about the business you and Dad built, and even more I need to understand about you. Love always. Margaret. William's letter arrived a week later. Less eloquent but equally sincere. Mom, I screwed up. Not just at dinner that night but for years before that. Dad always made success look easy, and I guess I thought that was my birthright too. Turns out I had to learn the hard way. This job is kicking my ass, but I'm actually good at it when I try. Made top sales last month. First time I've ever earned something completely on my own. I said terrible things to you. Things no son should ever say to his mother. There's no excuse for that. I was spoiled and entitled and mean. I don't know if you can forgive me or if things can ever be the same between us. But I'd like a chance to try. Your son, William. I read both letters multiple times, searching for manipulation or insincerity but finding none. 6 months had passed since that fateful dinner. 6 months of independent living for all of us. The time apart had created space for reflection and growth that no amount of family therapy sessions could have accomplished. After careful consideration, I decided it was time for the next phase of our family's healing. On a crisp spring morning, I arrived at the neutral location I'd selected for our family reunion. A private room at a restaurant halfway between the city and my coastal retreat. I'd chosen to meet them together, feeling we needed to address our family dynamics as a unit rather than individually. I arrived early, arranging the seating and fidgeting with my watch as I waited. Despite our correspondence over the previous weeks, I wasn't sure what to expect. Would they revert to old patterns when face to face? Had their changes been genuine or merely tactical? Margaret arrived first, punctual for perhaps the first time in her adult life. I barely recognized her as she entered. Gone were the designer clothes and perfectly manicured appearance. She wore a simple blazer over jeans, her hair pulled back in a practical style, minimal makeup highlighting a face that looked both older and somehow more authentic than before. We embraced awkwardly, both of us holding back tears. "You look well, Mom," she said, studying me. "The coast agrees with you." "You look different," I replied honestly. She laughed. A genuine sound I hadn't heard in years. "Working 60 hours a week will do that. Turns out sleep is more important than salon appointments." William arrived minutes later, also transformed. He'd lost weight, his previously soft frame now leaner. He'd grown a neat beard, and like his sister, dressed simply in clothes that wouldn't have warranted a second glance on the street. The initial conversation was stilted, filled with small talk about weather and traffic. I let them lead, curious to see what they would prioritize. "So," William finally ventured, "how's the business doing without us?" There it was, the opening I'd been waiting for. "Profits are up 17%, I answered matter-of-factly. "The new management team has implemented several changes that have reduced expenses while improving customer satisfaction." Both looked surprised. 17%? Margaret repeated. "That's impressive. And somewhat humbling," William added with unexpected self-awareness. "Seems we weren't as essential as we thought." "The business was never about any one person," I explained. "Your father understood that. It's about systems, principles, and a shared vision." Over lunch, the conversation gradually deepened. Margaret described her marketing job, including her initial struggles and recent successes. "My boss criticized my first campaign pitch as entitled and out of touch," she admitted. "I was furious until I realized he was right. I've never had to consider budget constraints or justify ROI before." William shared similar experiences from his sales position. "Last month, I closed a deal with a client who rejected me 3 times before. In the past, I would have given up or had Dad call in a favor. Instead, I reworked my entire presentation and won them over with actual data and persistence." As they spoke, I saw glimpses of the children Robert and I had raised, bright, capable individuals who had somehow lost their way in the comfort of privilege. Their struggles over the past months had been real, but so was their growth. "I've been angry at you," Margaret confessed as dessert arrived. "So angry I couldn't see straight. But recently I found an old photo album from when I was little. There you were, cooking in our first tiny kitchen while juggling orders for your catering business. You worked so hard for so long, and somehow I forgot that." "I took everything for granted," William added. "The business, the money, your support. I assumed it would always be there regardless of my behavior." "We both did," Margaret agreed. "It took losing it all to realize what we had." "You haven't lost everything," I corrected gently. "You've lost privileges and entitlements. But you've gained something more valuable, self-reliance and perspective." We talked for hours, moving beyond apologies into deeper understanding. I shared my own regrets about enabling their dependency and failing to maintain boundaries after Robert died. They shared insights about their childhood and the pressures they'd felt growing up in the shadow of successful parents. "I never felt I could measure up," William admitted. "It seemed easier not to try. And I focused on appearances rather than substance," Margaret added. "Keeping up with my wealthy friends became more important than earning their respect." As our meeting drew to a close, I outlined what would happen next. "The business will remain under professional management for now," I explained. "But I'd like both of you to attend monthly board meetings as observers, not participants. You need to understand the enterprise before you can help lead it." They nodded, accepting these terms without argument. "The trust restrictions will remain in place, but with adjustments. Your allowances will increase modestly to reflect your progress. As you continue to demonstrate responsibility, more control will be returned to you." "And what about you, Mom?" Margaret asked. "Will you come home?" I took a deep breath. "My home is at the coast now. I've found peace there and purpose. But I'll visit regularly, and you're welcome to visit me. We'll have Sunday dinner once a month, rotating locations." "So you're not coming back to the business either?" William seemed surprised. "Not in the same capacity," I explained. "I'll remain majority shareholder and chair of the board, but day-to-day operations are better left to people with fresh perspectives. I've spent 35 years building Eleanor's kitchen. Now I'm building something else, a life that's just for me." Over the following year, our family reconnected on new terms. The monthly dinners became genuinely enjoyable gatherings rather than obligatory events. Margaret and William continued their outside employment, while gradually taking on limited responsibilities within the family business, now approaching it with humility rather than entitlement. Margaret moved into a comfortable but modest house, focusing on creating a warm home rather than an impressive address. She started dating a colleague from her marketing firm, a kind, hardworking man who valued her mind more than her family name. William discovered an unexpected talent for mentoring young sales associates, finding satisfaction in helping others succeed. He began volunteering with a youth entrepreneurship program, teaching business skills to high school students from disadvantaged backgrounds. Most heartening was the change in my grandchildren. Sophia, now 17, asked to spend her summer break with me at the coast, where she learned to bake and developed an interest in marine biology. Thomas, at 15, had transformed from a sullen gaming addict to an engaged student and athlete, proudly showing me his improved grades when I visited. 18 months after our separation, I invited the entire family to my coastal cottage for Thanksgiving. As I watched them help prepare the meal, chopping vegetables, setting the table, working together without complaint, I felt Robert's presence strongly. "You would be proud of them," I whispered to his memory as I basted the turkey. They found their way back. The business continued to thrive under its new structure. Eleanor's kitchen even opened 2 new locations, planned with careful financial analysis rather than ego-driven expansion. I attended ribbon-cutting ceremonies as the founder but left operational decisions to the professional team and my increasingly capable children. During dessert, Margaret raised her glass in an impromptu toast. "To Mom," she said, her eyes bright with unshed tears, "who had the courage to do what none of us could, tell the truth, no matter how painful. And to Dad," William added, "who helped build not just a business but a legacy of values we almost lost." Later, as we cleared dishes together, William asked the question that had clearly been on his mind. "Do you regret it, Mom? Leaving like that?" It was pretty dramatic. I considered his question carefully. "I regret that it became necessary," I answered honestly. "I regret the pain it caused all of us. But no, I don't regret the decision itself. Sometimes love means having the courage to do what's right, not what's easy." That phrase became something of a family motto in the years that followed. We weren't perfect, old habits occasionally resurfaced, requiring gentle but firm reminders of our journey. But we had found our way back to what mattered most: respect, accountability, and genuine connection. As for me, I continued my coastal life, finding joy in simplicity and purpose in unexpected places. The small bakery where I'd volunteered became partly mine when Denise needed a business partner. Eleanor's Corner became known for specialty items that attracted visitors from miles around. The greatest lesson I learned through this journey was that it's never too late to change course. Not for me. Not for my children. Not for our family. True wealth isn't measured in dollars or possessions, but in the courage to face difficult truths and the wisdom to choose love over convenience. I often think about that terrible dinner and the painful words that changed everything. "Shut up, widow." A phrase intended to diminish me, instead became the catalyst for all of us to find our authentic selves and rebuild our family on a foundation of mutual respect rather than obligation and entitlement. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have had the courage to walk away from everything to save the people you love from their worst impulses? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched you, please give it a like and subscribe to hear more real-life stories about family, forgiveness, and finding the strength to stand up for yourself. Remember, sometimes the hardest choices lead to the most beautiful beginnings. Thank you for listening to my story.